Hello, hello, hello. How are you? Good to see everybody back in the spot today. Welcome back. We are in the fourth day of the Bid Academy Bootcamp. So pleased to see you all. We have got some heavy hitters that are here joining us today, sharing their subject matter expertise. But before we get into that, this is Thankful It's Thursday. Put in the chat box and tell me what you're thankful for. You know, I want to hear from you. If you don't talk to me, I'm going to feel slighted. So what's going on? What are you thankful for on this Thursday? I'm thankful it's Thursday because woo-wee, this has been a week. What are you thankful for this Thursday, guys? Chat, talk to me. Come on, guys. Getting you warmed up for our presenters.
That the sun is shining.
Amen.
Outside. No
Thank
snow.
you. I love it. Good. Thankful for this boot camp. Aw, thank you, Shannon. That's wonderful. Good stuff. Well, all right. I will not belabor the point. If you think of something, feel free to chat with me in the chat box so that we can stay in contact. Now, we have got some powerful presenters coming to us from the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. These guys know their stuff. They've been doing it for years upon years. So I'm sure that they can answer any and all questions that you might have. I'm going to introduce Terrell Knight, and then he's going to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon. Terrell is a procurement specialist at PTAC. He was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, relocating to Columbus to start his career. While working at the Ohio Senate, Terrell grew to fall in love with the city of Columbus. He became active in various local organizations and volunteers to feed the homeless several times throughout the year, including Thanksgiving. And we were talking about his famous macaroni and cheese. So I'm hoping I can get some of that come this season. Terrell went on to work at the Ohio Minority Supplier Diversity Council as the Associate Director of MBE Services. In this role, he was an MBE certification officer, MBE Supplier Development Counselor, Small and Minority Business Advisor, and Corporate Relationship Manager. He served in the northern region of Ohio within the statewide organization. He has been advising and developing small and minority-owned businesses for 9 years with previous work experience with the Ohio MSDC and the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Terrell brings a wealth of small and minority business expertise as a subject matter expert in certification, business best practices, and capacity building. I'm going to learn a ton from this young man and also from Mr. Cox, and I know you will as well. Terrell, you want to go ahead and take it over from here?
Thank you, Janine. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, thank you to the Minority Business Assistance Center based out of Columbus, Ohio, and Director Kimberly Gale and Janine and Advisor Janine Hooks for inviting PTAC to come to the table to talk with you all today. I know that this time is a difficult time for all of us, but we're managing to get through it. And I'm just wanting to let you know that we're all in this together. Thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today and sit here through this great presentation. I know as business owners, time is of the essence. So you having the time to learn and come and join us today is greatly appreciated. As mentioned, I am Terrell Knight with the Ohio University PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And today we're going to talk about subcontracting and joint venture. Businesses of all sizes sometimes lack resources to bid on certain contracts and opportunities. At other times, companies realize they don't have the required expertise in-house to obtain required results. Joint ventures and subcontracting are common ways to combine resources of two otherwise unrelated companies. There are many benefits to this type of partnership, but it's not without risk. Arrangements of this sort can be highly complex. One of the most important advantages of joint venture is that it helps your business grow faster, it increases productivity, and is a great generator of profits. Today, we have Bill Cox, the Southwest Ohio Associate Director of the Ohio University Procurement Technical Assistance Center, joining us today, and he will discuss with you all subcontracting and joint ventures, the benefits of it and the importance of it. Prior to assuming his position in 2013, Bill served in the U.S. Air Force for 26 years, worked as a defense coordinator, director of operations, and business development manager. and he led the development and implementation of large information technology systems. He has more than 15 years of experience in government procurement and is certified as a Level 3 program manager with the Department of Defense Acquisition Professional and Development Program. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Well, thank you, Terrell, for that kind introduction. And many thanks to Sharon and the others at the Columbus MBAC for the opportunity to present to your group today. I'm looking forward to the presentation, and hopefully we'll all learn together. So, Sharon, if you could bring up my first slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. Let's talk a minute why this is important, between the differences between a joint venture and subcontracting. They are different concepts, but they both can achieve the same objective. The challenge for you as a business owner, if you want to pursue either one of these, is deciding which construct, if you will, is appropriate for the opportunity that you're pursuing. They have differences in terms of the ease of how they can be formed, many differences in the timeline. The joint venture takes a lot longer to form. Costs are also a consideration. A joint venture is much more expensive to form than just a typical subcontracting. And the duration can be quite different, how long these are going to last. One of the big differences, and also one of the allures of doing the joint venture, is that past performance, which typically has to be cited in the proposal, are treated quite differently between a subcontracting and a joint venture. But they're also, the risk for a protest in an award situation is quite different. And joint ventures can be much more risky as far as a protest. So next slide, please. Very simple. In subcontracting, you will have a team lead known as the prime contractor. And beneath the prime contractor, there will be at least one subcontractor if the prime needs one, and it could be a large number of subcontractors. Now, let me stop and tell you right here that if the opportunity is relatively simple and relatively small, and I'm talking relatively small, maybe just a couple $1 million for the contract. And if you bid as a prime contractor and you have 3, 4, 5 or more subcontractors, that is going to raise some questions in the government's mind. Number one, the question is going to be, if you have all these subcontractors doing a piece of the work, well, what are you going to do as the prime contractor? One of the other questions it's going to raise in the government's mind is, what is your span of control? You know, are you going to be able to coordinate the activities of all of these various subcontractors? So keep that in mind if you're going to be a prime contractor at some point and you need to subcontract out some of the work. Now, there are valid reasons to subcontract out, and we'll talk about some of those in the session tomorrow. We'll touch on that, but just keep it in mind that it's, all of these are strategic decisions and subcontracting and deciding how many subcontractors that you're going to have if you're a prime contractor is a strategic decision, and do it for a reason and do it for a purpose, not because it's just a nice thing to do. Next slide, please. So in essence, subcontracting is simply where two or more companies agree to work together to pursue and win a contract. There is no effect on the ownership of the individual companies involved, either the prime or the subcontractors. For the subcontractors, you must accept the prime contractor's decisions on pursuit, to include the prime contractor at the 11th hour saying, for whatever reason we've decided, we're not going to submit a proposal. And yes, I have seen that happen before in federal contracting. That at the last minute, for the prime contractor may decide, you know, we've really looked at this one last time, and we've decided that we can't win. So therefore, we're going to pull the plug on this and not spend any more money on it. And as a potential subcontractor, you don't really have any recourse. Now, typically, not always, but typically, when they set up an arrangement between a prime and a subcontractor, the subcontractor will be exclusive to that prime for that specific opportunity. And it's not unusual, especially in federal contracting, and I experienced this before when I was in private industry, that I might be a subcontractor or I might be the prime contractor, and I'd get together with a team of people and we'd be working hand in glove, shoulder to shoulder, in the trenches to try to win a particular contract. And then in the afternoon, I'd go back to my office and have to work on another proposal where I was trying to write a proposal to win some of the existing work that my company had in a recompetition for that work. And some of the same companies I'd worked with that morning were competing against me. So it kind of makes for strange bedfellows. And the analogy I always use is in the movies on organized crime, where the one gentleman who's getting ready to be killed looks up at his friend who's getting ready to kill him and says, "Why are you going to kill me?" And the guy says, "It ain't personal, it's just business." And that's kind of the way it works in government contracting. So you just kind of have to keep that mindset. Now in subcontracting, work share will be negotiated between the prime and the subcontractor and should be negotiated in advance. And this will be through an evolving relationship. It will typically start out with what's called a non-disclosure agreement. When a prime and a potential subcontractor first meet and they discuss an opportunity and both parties are interested in working together, typically the prime contractor will send a non-disclosure agreement to the potential subcontractor. And really all the non-disclosure agreement says in general is that both parties are going to discuss some sensitive information and may exchange sensitive information about their companies and their pursuit of a particular opportunity. And it could be information on past performance. It could be some market intelligence that's been gathered. It could be all sorts of different things. And both parties will keep that information confidential and not share it with outside parties without permission. So assuming that the non-disclosure agreement is signed and then the relationship continues to evolve and they work together and they appear to want to continue to work together, normally then you'll find the next step will be what's called a teaming agreement. And in the teaming agreement, basically it's just more of a formal legal document that says this particular company as a subcontractor is going to work with the name of the company that's the prime contractor to pursue a specific opportunity. And normally it will say that the subcontractor is going to be exclusive to that prime contractor. And then there will be an addendum to the non-disclosure agreement. And the addendum, normally called an exhibit, will either specify the work share that the subcontractor is expected to receive, and it can be expressed in a lot of different ways. It can be expressed as a percentage of some definite work that's outlined in the request for proposal by the government. It could be expressed in terms of if this particular skill set or skill sets is required, the subcontractor will be expected to provide all the labor hours required to fulfill that particular skill set. And those type of agreements that are somewhat a little vague are more typical and used in what's called the federal government will call indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, where the government can't specifically outline up front what their definitive requirements are, but they know over time they're probably going to spend, and they'll give you a range of funds to provide a type of services or goods, and they'll say, will we expect we're going to buy this range of goods or services over a period of years. Also in the teaming agreement in the exhibit, there will be a section where the prime contractor will delineate to the subcontractor what they expect them to do to help them win the contract from the government. It could be supporting business development and marketing meetings with the government. It will normally include support writing the proposal. And it could say that the subcontractor is going to have to provide a number of past performance citations. Because in a especially in a federal, and it also, you'll see it in a state RFP and even local government for services, you'll see the government will tell the offerer, which is the prime contractor, tell us where you've done similar work to what we're asking for before, and give us some contact information for that customer so we can go call and check on your past performance. So expect in the teaming agreement, they will be asked to provide past performance examples. The next step in the evolution is that, assuming that your prime contractor is successful and wins the contract, the teaming agreement will be translated into a formal subcontract between you and the prime contractor. And then from that point, at the direction of the prime contractor, the subcontractor will begin performing the work that's outlined in the subcontract. Now, there is no prohibition on subcontracting to the same prime contract for multiple contracts. So as a subcontractor, you can be a subcontractor on 1, 5, 10, 15, any number of other contracts that prime contractor has. And what you will find is, over time, a prime contractor will develop a group of subcontractors that they are very comfortable with and they get used to using. And you will see them use the same subcontractors over and over again. There's a variety of reasons for that, because they know their past performance of the subcontractor. They know how they're going to use the subcontractor's past performance and the capabilities they bring, how they're going to weave that into their proposal. They're comfortable with the quality of the work that the subcontractor performs. They know the subcontractor understands what that prime contractor expects from the subcontractor. So they don't have to go out and educate and teach a new subcontractor. So that's why these relationships are extremely important. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, some of the advantages of subcontracting. They are relatively easy and quick and low cost to set up. And there's lots of discussions that start with a non-disclosure agreement, and it never progresses to a teaming agreement. And getting an NDA signed is relatively simple. There's no organizational changes to the prime or the subcontractor. So there's no legal implications there in terms of your registration with the state, et cetera. And in your registration in your system for award management. The legal costs are much lower versus what we're going to talk about in a joint venture in a minute. There is a single entity to address questions. When the government awards a contract, the federal government awards a contract, or even the state awards a contract to a prime contractor with subcontractors, the contracting officer for the government has one point of contact to go to for questions or issues on performance or schedule or price or cost. And that's the prime contractor. The subcontractor has what's called no privity of contract. So the subcontractor, if they're having a dispute with the prime contractor, they can call and complain to the government contracting officer. The government contracting officer may elect to listen to the discussion. They may not. But the government contracting officer is interested, but it's not germane to them, because the only people they're going to hold accountable for performance is the prime contractor. Frankly, another one of the big advantages is that government contracting officers and government program office personnel, the program managers, etc., are more accustomed to the prime contractor subcontractor relationship. They see that more on a daily basis. Accordingly, they're used to dealing with it. They understand it better. So therefore, it's easier from their perspective. Next slide, please. Now, there are some downsides. When the government's evaluating a proposal, and I can tell you this from past experience of being in the government and being on evaluation teams, and also occasionally being what's called on smaller opportunities, the source selection official. That's the one who decides who gets the award. That the evaluation team and the source selection official can view subcontractor past performance. They may not give it the same weight or same consideration as they would if it was past performance from the prime contractor. And prime contractors know this. So why do they have subcontractors? Because they believe they need to have this past performance in the proposal, and their company doesn't have it. So one way of getting it is to have a subcontractor on their team and submit that past performance citation as a part of the proposal. We've mentioned the privity of contract issue. The subcontractor is also reliant on the prime contractor honoring the teaming agreement and the subcontract. And you will find that the government's contracting officer isn't going to step into disputes in that area. Another area that a lot of people don't think about is the government contract changes can disadvantage a subcontractor. You know, especially in a federal contract, there is the changes clause. And in the changes clause, the prime contractor is told that the federal contracting officer has the unilateral right to make any change at any time to a federal contract. And that may impact the prime contractor, likely will impact the subcontractor. The only recourse is the prime contractor will get a chance to submit a request for equitable adjustment, or if that fails, can submit a claim against the government to recoup legitimate expenses that they've incurred. Well, this change may be a disadvantage to the subcontractor. Supposing you had a subcontract for work on a contract, and your part of the work was going to start, let's say, toward the tail end of the contract, maybe in a 4-year contract, maybe in year 3. And your year 1 of the contract, and something happens, and the government makes a significant change in the contract, and therefore the result of this change is your services aren't needed in year 3. Well, your prime contractor is going to flow down that change to you through an amendment to your subcontract. And because you haven't started any work yet, or any planning really for any work yet, you probably don't have any costs you've expended. So therefore, there's nothing to recoup. But all the costs that you spent helping the prime contractor win the contract, let's put it this way: the prime contractor and the government thank you for your interest in effect, thank you for your interest in national defense. You're out those costs. So there is an old rule of thumb in industry, because the subcontractor is always on the tail end. And the old rule of thumb and the old saying was, being a sub sucks. And that's one of the ways where it can be to your disadvantage to be a subcontractor. But there are reasons to do it, especially to be a subcontractor, especially if you are a new company just trying to break into the government market. And that's a whole different seminar. Another disadvantage, you're also second in line for payment. The government will pay the prime in accordance with the terms and conditions in their contract with the government. Then you are beholden that the prime contractor will pay you in accordance with the terms in your subcontract. Excuse me. If you have a dispute with your prime contractor, like we said before, the government is going to avoid those like the plague. Those are, in effect, internal family issues, and the government is not going to get involved with those. And in effect, if these disputes become public, that could very well kill your relationship with that prime contractor and damage your potential for getting future subcontract work from that prime. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to transition into a joint venture. And you can see that a joint venture is a totally different construct. Because in a joint venture, Company A and Company B provide resources and intellectual capital, perhaps even some financial resources, and lo and behold, a new company, Company C, is created. So here there are some ownership issues. Next slide. Now these slides from here, because I wanted to be very precise, I'll tell you right up front, I'll give credit to some presentation that was given by Co-Prince Law LLC. They are a government procurement law firm that do a lot of work in this area. So I liberally took a lot of information that they had presented on joint ventures. And a joint venture really is an association of two or more businesses that are going to jointly bid on and perform work, and it's for profit through their combined efforts, resources, and knowledge. Like we showed on the previous slide, a new legal entity, a new company is going to be created. It will require a written joint venture agreement. And this has protest considerations if a contract is awarded to a joint venture company and then it's protested. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. For a federal contract, and most joint ventures are involve federal contracting, the joint venture requires its own registration in what's called the System for Award Management, known as SAM. And SAM is the basic registration system for companies that want to pursue federal contracting. And your SAM registration has to be active at the time you submit your proposal. And if you've never registered a company before in SAM, if your proposal is due tomorrow, don't start on your registration today. Don't start on your registration this past Monday. Sometimes your registration may take 6 weeks. So this is something that you should do well in advance. And this gets back to the point on the slide we talked about way up front, that there are different considerations in the timeline for a joint venture versus subcontracting. A joint venture will be called what's called unpopulated, meaning that the employees that are performing the direct labor on any contracts won by the joint venture are not employees of the joint venture. They're typically employees of the companies that helped form the joint venture. Now, the joint venture can employ some personnel for administrative functions, and also if you're doing work on a contract that requires access to classified information, and you will have a corporate security manager. That corporate security manager can be an employee of the joint venture. Next slide. Now, a small business has to own at least 51% of the joint venture. And any profits from the joint venture will be distributed proportional to the work each party performs, not the ownership percentage. The JV requires a separate bank account. And this is a change that withdrawals require the approval from all members. In certain circumstances, that requirement is getting relaxed, especially if you have what's called a mentor-protege agreement. But still, in general, in a joint venture, you may have to have approval. You may have to have a signature of each one of the companies on the checks. Any equipment, facilities, and major resources should be inventoried and should be listed who has contributed what. So there's an accurate tracking. And each company that is participating needs to have its various functions documented. For example, if business development's being done by company A, that should be documented. If the proposal managers are going to be supplied by company B, that should be identified. And each member of a joint venture, each company, is obligated for the performance of the joint venture on a contract, even if one member withdraws. So think about this very, very carefully before you go into a joint venture. Next slide, please. Now, in a joint venture, one company is going to be considered the managing partner and will provide the person that's going to lead the JV. One of the interesting things is the joint venture is entitled to use any of the socioeconomic certifications held by the managing partner. And now we're talking about for federal procurement. There is an exception. If the joint venture is formed by members of a Small Business Administration approved mentor and protege, even if the mentor is a large business, that JV may use the socioeconomic certifications held by the protege and bid for small business set-aside contracts set aside for that protege certification. This is why, one reason why large businesses have an incentive to participate in the mentor protege program, and then also then later form a joint venture. Joint ventures can compete and win 3 contracts over 2 years. So joint ventures are not a permanent entity. It is a company with a beginning and a company with an end of life. But the same 2 or more companies can continue to work together by forming new joint ventures. So you could have, in the slide we used up front, you could have joint venture company C, and then company A and B later on could form joint venture company D. So this process can be repeated. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some of the advantages of a joint venture. A joint venture allows both companies, or all companies that are part of a joint venture, to combine their strengths to submit the best possible proposal in terms of its resources that it can describe in the proposal. But past performance is the biggest advantage. If the joint venture has already won at least one contract, it can use its own past performance, but it's also entitled to use all of the past performance of the companies that contributed to form the joint venture. So, if you went into a joint venture with a large business, you could claim all of the past performance from that large business in your proposal. And normally a large business will have had, obviously, a large number of contracts and will have a large number of past performances, and very likely will have one that will be relevant and recent to the opportunity you're pursuing. So that's why a lot of companies will try to form a joint venture with a larger company. And therefore, the joint venture members gain past performance they may not have obtained, especially if the other member of the joint venture is a small business. And this does permit a large business as a joint venture member to pursue small business contracts. So there's an advantage there. Next slide, please. Now, there are some disadvantages. Like we've mentioned, the time and cost to set this up is significant versus subcontracting. Since you're forming a new company, you've got the process of going through the state business registration process. You have to, if you're assuming you're doing this for federal contracting, right now you have to get a DUNS number and you have to register in the system for award management. You also have to have an operating agreement. But this operating agreement will not be reviewed by the government prior to a contract award. So let's say you form a joint venture. And congratulations, your joint venture company wins a contract. And then lo and behold, the contracting officer calls you today, tells you congratulations, you won the contract. Tomorrow they call you and say, you know, I'm sorry, we've received a protest against the award from another bidder. So I've got to issue you a stop work order to stop performance on the contract. And oh, by the way, I need you to submit a whole bunch of documentation to me, one of which is your operating agreement. And then at that point, the operating agreement will be reviewed. If they find errors or mistakes in the operating agreement, that may invalidate the joint venture in that it was improperly formed. And that will very likely result in you losing that contract. So the government's not going to review your operating agreement prior to the award, will only review it post-award in the event of a protest, but by then it's too late to fix any mistakes. So I can't foot stomp it strongly enough that if you consider setting up a joint venture, go see a law firm, and there's several of them out there that are experienced in joint ventures for federal procurement, and get them involved up front to make sure that everything is filed correctly and that your operating agreement will pass scrutiny under a protest. One of the other disadvantages of a joint venture, and to a certain degree, this exists in a subcontracting, but especially in a joint venture, you're going to have at least two partners. You know, it's the old, will this marriage work? You don't want to get part way in a contract and discover for whatever reason, because of things beyond your control, or because of the philosophy of the two companies, or the owners of the two companies, that y'all can't stand each other. There is nothing worse than being stuck in a situation like that. And I'm kind of a big history buff, so I am reminded of one of Napoleon's maxims of war, and one of them was he would rather have one bad general than two good ones, because invariably the two good ones couldn't work together. Next slide, please. So I've kind of given you a very high-level introductory view of subcontracting and also joint ventures. Either one can be a successful strategy. It's up to you to decide which one is the best strategy. And it's going to be a balance of what you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, and then also balancing the cost and the time to set it up. And that's where an experienced law firm, experienced in government procurement, may be helpful in advising you in making those decisions. Subcontracting is easier to set up. It's better understood by the government. There's no change to the company ownership. The prime contractor will be the single face to the government. The subcontractor is in a secondary position, as we talked about. In terms of a joint venture, they are much more expensive and time-consuming to set up, but they do provide benefits in terms of being able to use the past performance of the members of the joint venture. But it's always a question, especially in a joint venture, can the companies work together? And also, the operating agreement can be a challenge, and you always have the risk of was it set up correctly before you won that contract, and then somebody files a protest, and as a part of their protest, they claim that your operating agreement is invalid because it's not established correctly. So I recommend for either strategy that you seek legal advice, but especially for a joint venture. You may have a lawyer that you use today that was very helpful and very good at registering your company with the state or handling some other basic legal matters as far as the lease on your facility or whatnot. But if they've never done government procurement, trust me, joint ventures are, for federal contracting, is a whole different ballgame. And you really want to have somebody who's been there and done that before. So with that, I think I've talked just about going on an hour. So I will stop here at this point and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions at all for Bill or Terrell? I know that was a lot of information, fairly technical. The purpose of introducing these topics is to make sure that you have enough information to have a working definition of what they are not, so that should an opportunity arise for you, you determine if this is a good fit for you and your business. You can look at your business strategy to figure out if you have the capacity to grow in this area. If not now, then is this a strategy in your 3 to 5 year mark? So, it's all about goal setting and understanding what those opportunities look like. So I hope that you aren't afraid of what you've heard and that you are encouraged to look for those, reach for those, and to make sure that you're in the presence of people that know how these things operate. Bill and Terrell, can you tell us how to reach out to you if we want more in-depth information, or if we believe we have an opportunity for either one of these procurement opportunities on the horizon?
Sure. One way you can reach out to us is to visit our website, which is www.ptac.ohio.edu. I'll say that again for you all there. It's www.ptac.ohio.edu. And then also my email address is pretty easy. It's Terrell, Terrell, K, my last initial, at ohio.edu. So that is Terrell K at ohio.edu. And feel free to reach out to us and reach out to PTAC as you see fit. This is PTAC is here to help guide you through the government procurement process, whether that be on the federal, state, or local level. We also provide a certain level of technical assistance to your business to help you be able to be a more viable candidate to the federal government and to other government procurement agencies. So we're here to be as helpful as possible. If you ever have any questions, or if you're ever thinking that PTAC can be of any assistance to you or your business, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be right there, right by your side to provide that assistance to you.
Excellent. And hey, gang, know that this presentation will be sent to you, as Sharon has been pushing that information out to you after the workshop. So you'll have that. And if worse comes to worse, you can always email me, and I'll make sure that I make that connection for you and answer the questions to the best of my ability. All right. Well, our time is up for today. We've got one more day left where tomorrow we're going to be talking about the successful elements of what a proposal would look like. So I want you all to stay tuned, stay connected, and hey, be well and stay safe these days. We need you as small business owners, and we appreciate being able to work with you on each and every opportunity. PTAC, guys, Bill and Terrell, you brought the fire today. You stumped our brains, I think, a little bit, but I so appreciate the information, your support, your participation, and I look forward to hearing from you again on tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Bye.